Things his father didn't. Things even I stopped paying attention to. I still remember the way he looked at me that day. Not in any strange or inappropriate way, but like someone who finally realized the person sitting across from them was breaking. I had dropped something in the garage. A heavy box of Christmas decorations tucked away in a corner I hadn't touched in months. It slipped from my hands and I cried out, not in pain, really, but out of sheer exhaustion. That kind of cry that says, I can't do this anymore. I didn't think anyone heard me. But he did. Luke was there. And without saying a word, he walked over and picked everything up. He looked at me and said, "You don't have to do this alone, you know." And I swear, those words cracked something inside me, not because they were romantic or special or even profound, but because they were real. You see, when you're starved of affection, kindness feels dangerous. It slips under your skin and stays there. I didn't fall in love with my stepson. This isn't that kind of story. But I did start to feel again. And that was enough to change everything. I didn't know it at the time. But that simple moment, his help, his presence, his noticing me, was the match that lit a fire I'd been trying so hard to smother. And that fire? It would go on to burn everything I thought I had under control. So, before you judge me, walk with me through what happened. Understand the emptiness I was living with. The slow erosion of love. The quiet ache of being needed, but never held. Because sometimes, the most unexpected help doesn't come to fix you. Sometimes, it comes to reveal just how broken you've been all along. Subscribe now to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where we unearth the stories no one dares to speak aloud. Where hearts don't just beat, they break. And sometimes, they wake up. I tried. I really did. I tried to be the wife he needed, the woman this house demanded. The dependable one. The steady one. The quiet one. I cleaned. I cooked. I smiled when it was expected, laughed when it was polite, nodded when I wanted to scream. Until one day, I stopped recognizing the woman in the mirror. She looked like me. Same eyes, same skin, same hands, but her eyes were dull. Her mouth, tired. Her hands, always busy but never held. That house was beautiful, you know. Tall ceilings, wide windows, fresh white walls, hardwood floors that echoed when you walked alone at night. It had everything, except warmth. It was the kind of house people envy from the outside, but on the inside, it was just cold. Not from the air. From the silence. My husband, Mark, was always gone. Work, he said. Late meetings. Weekend flights. He'd call sometimes. Say, hey, just checking in. But even over the phone, his voice felt miles away. We used to be something. Before the schedules. Before the distance. Now, he kissed me like a formality. Touched me like a checklist. Spoke to me like I was a coworker, not a partner. I started to count how many days we'd go without a real conversation. Some weeks. We didn't speak about anything other than groceries or bills. And then there was Luke. 19. Quiet. Always had headphones around his neck and a book under his arm. He wasn't mine. He was from Mark's first marriage. Moved in with us after his mom remarried and things got complicated over there. At first, we barely spoke. He kept to himself. Stayed in his room. Came out for meals and disappeared again. But over time, I noticed him noticing. He'd watch me without saying much. Like he saw something no one else bothered to look at. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Maybe he just felt sorry for me. Or maybe he was just quiet like that. But it meant something. Because in a house where I felt like furniture, being seen, really seen, even for a second, felt like air filling my lungs after being underwater for too long. I remember once, I caught him watching me cook. Not in a creepy way. Just observing. His eyes weren't filled with judgment. They were soft. Curious. Like he was trying to understand something about me that I hadn't even figured out yet. And that scared me. because no one had looked at me like that in years. Not Mark. Not anyone. The more time passed, the more the walls in that house started to shift. Not literally, but emotionally. I started to feel something unfamiliar. A presence. A warmth. Not coming from my husband, but from someone who had no idea he was becoming a part of my quiet unraveling. Luke wasn't loud. He didn't fill a room. But he had this way of just being there. Present. Still. Safe. And in a home that felt so emotionally empty, that stillness felt like comfort. I didn't realize how much I needed that. Not until the silence between us started to feel like understanding, not avoidance. I thought I was doing fine. I thought I had it all under control. But then again, we always think that. Until something or someone shows us just how much we've been missing. It happened on a Saturday. One of those overcast afternoons where the sky just hangs, not quite raining, not quite clear. Mark was gone again. Some client meeting in another city. He left early, like always, with that same rushed kiss on the cheek, that same half-hearted take care of yourself, like I was some plant left behind that just needed water and light. I'd been putting off cleaning the garage. Too many boxes. Too many memories. Old holiday decorations, college textbooks, dusty containers labeled miscellaneous. I just wanted to clear a little space. Something small. Something to make me feel like I was still useful. I reached too far. Lifted too much. And something in my wrist gave a sharp, sudden jolt. I dropped the box, and it hit the ground with a heavy thud, ornaments scattered across the concrete like broken promises. I gasped. Not from pain, exactly, but from frustration. I leaned against the wall, clutching my wrist, eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. I didn't expect anyone to come. No one ever did. But then, I heard footsteps. Luke. He must have heard the crash from inside. He walked in without knocking, his eyes immediately scanning the mess, then landing on me. And for a moment, he just stood there. Not in shock. Not in judgment. Just aware. He walked over slowly, like he didn't want to startle me. Kneeled beside me without saying a word, his hand brushing mine as he looked at the swelling wrist. "Are you okay?" he asked. And it wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Like the question actually meant something. Like I mattered. I nodded, too embarrassed to speak. But something in me cracked open right then. Because in that one moment, kneeling there in the cold garage with a 19-year-old boy looking at me like I was made of something worth protecting, I realized just how long it had been since anyone had looked at me like that. Since anyone had asked how I was and meant it. Luke helped me up, one hand steadying my back, the other careful around my wrist. He didn't ask for permission. He just helped. He brought me inside. Sat me down at the kitchen table. Wrapped my wrist with a soft cloth and an ice pack from the freezer. I watched him move around the kitchen like he knew the space. Like he'd already mapped out what I needed. It felt strange. And familiar. And kind. Too kind. Later that evening, I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was just a sweet moment, nothing more. Just a boy being decent. But it lingered. The way his fingers hovered just long enough to feel deliberate. The way he looked at me like I wasn't just someone's wife, someone's burden, but a person. That night, lying in bed alone, I found myself replaying the sound of his voice. Just that simple question. "Are you okay?" And the ache in my chest wasn't from the sprain. It was from something deeper. Something I had locked away for years and forgotten how to name. That was the moment I realized something dangerous. I hadn't been touched with care in years. I told myself it was nothing. That Luke was just being sweet. That he was only helping because he felt obligated. Because that's what good sons do, right? I clung to that thought like a lifeline. Told myself over and over again, he's just kind. That's all it is. That's all it could ever be. But small things started to grow. Little things. The kinds of things you could almost ignore if you weren't so desperate to feel alive. It started with the way he helped me into my coat one morning. Such a simple gesture, but the way his fingers brushed my shoulders, lingering just a second longer than they should have, sent a ripple through me so strong, I had to step away and pretend I needed to find my keys. Then there was the tea. One evening, I came downstairs and found a cup waiting for me on the counter. Steam rising, honey swirled in just the way I liked it. No words, no note, just there. I hadn't told him how I took my tea, but somehow he knew. Another morning, I woke up late, exhausted, my wrist aching, my heart heavier than I could carry. And when I shuffled into the kitchen, there he was, buttering toast. Not his. Mine. Lightly browned. No crusts. Just the way I've always made it for myself, back when someone caring enough to do it for me had been just a dream. He looked up, smiled shyly, and slid the plate across the counter toward me. Didn't say a word. Didn't have to. It was in the way he noticed. The way he paid attention to things no one else even saw. And somewhere deep inside, something started to whisper. He sees you. Not as his father's wife, but as a woman. I shook my head. I fought it, pushed the thoughts down so hard they made my chest ache. Because I knew it was wrong. I knew it, but wrongness. Wrongness has a way of slipping through the cracks when you've been starved for softness for so long. When every touch you used to know has turned mechanical. When every word that once made you blush now sounds like paperwork. When you ache for something you can't even name anymore. I would lie in bed at night, staring up at the ceiling, replaying every small moment from the day. The brush of his hand, the way he stood a little too close when he handed me something, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. And each memory felt like a drop of water wearing away the stone walls I had built around myself for so many years. I hated myself for noticing. I hated the way my heart sped up when I heard his footsteps in the hallway. I hated the way I caught myself smoothing my hair, checking my reflection in the mirror, wondering if he would notice me today the way he did yesterday. It wasn't love. It wasn't lust. It wasn't anything I could wrap in a neat little box and explain away. It was hunger. A hunger for connection. For warmth. For someone to look at me and not see a chore, or a responsibility, or a forgotten wife tucked between business trips. It was dangerous. I knew that. And still, I stayed close to the flame. Pretending I didn't notice how warm it was, how good it felt, how easily it could burn everything to the ground. Nothing had happened, not really. No lines crossed, no words said, no promises made. But everything had changed. I was suddenly aware of every breath I took near him, every brush of air between us, every second of silence that now felt filled with something unspoken. We started spending more time together, but always under the mask of casual things. He'd join me in the living room while I folded laundry, sit at the kitchen counter while I cooked, ask if I needed help with groceries, or fixing the lamp, or watering the plants. Always helpful, always present, always kind. And I let him, because kindness felt good, because company felt better than the echo of my own thoughts. Because pretending this was all innocent was easier than admitting what was happening between us. One afternoon, I was sitting on the edge of the couch, legs tucked beneath me, trying to rub the ache from my wrist again. I winced. Luke walked in, noticed, and sat beside me. Close. Not too close. But close enough that I felt the heat of him. You really should rest that hand, he said, almost teasing. Then he smiled. Reached for the nail polish I'd left on the table from the night before. He held it up with a raised eyebrow. I laughed. Go on then, I said, half joking, half hoping he wouldn't. But he did. He took my foot gently in his hand and started painting. Clumsy strokes. Tongue between his teeth in mock concentration. Both of us laughing at first. Light. Easy. But then the laughter faded. And the room fell still. He finished the last toe. Looked up at me. I looked down at him. And suddenly, there was nothing left to say. Just a long, charged silence, thick with everything neither of us could admit out loud. He let go of my foot slowly. His fingertips brushed against my ankle. Barely, but it sent something through me I couldn't name. Later that evening, we sat on the couch again, closer this time. The movie on the screen was just background noise. I wasn't watching. Neither was he. I noticed a small piece of lint on his shirt, reached over to brush it off, and lingered. My fingers stayed longer than they should have. Rested flat against his chest for a breath too long. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Just looked at me, and I looked back. No one said a word, but the air between us was loud. After that, I started dressing a little differently. Not obvious. Just more deliberate. A touch of lipstick. A softer blouse. A perfume I hadn't worn in years. I told myself it was nothing. Just wanting to feel good in my skin again. But I knew the truth. I only reached for that perfume on the days I knew Luke would be home. I noticed him noticing. The way his eyes lingered when I walked into the room. The way he stood a little straighter. The way his voice softened when he said my name. We danced in a space that neither of us dared to define. A quiet rhythm of glances and nearness and unspoken feelings. And then, one night, he knocked on my door. Soft. 3 taps. Not urgent. Just steady. I froze. Heart in my throat. Breath caught in my chest. Fingers wrapped around the edge of my blanket, knuckles white. I didn't answer. Not right away. Because everything I'd been trying to silence, every feeling I had pushed down, every thought I had denied, every ache I'd buried deep, came rushing to the surface. And I knew nothing after that moment would ever be the same. That night, something in me broke. I don't know what finally pushed it over the edge. Maybe it was the silence in the house. Maybe it was the smell of his cologne still hanging faint in the hallway. Maybe it was just the weight of all the things I hadn't said, hadn't let myself feel. But I fell apart. Alone in my room, curled up on the edge of the bed, I let it come. The tears. The ache. The kind of crying that feels like your body is trying to squeeze grief from your bones. No sound. Just shaking, breath catching in your throat. The kind of sorrow you can't explain because it's been building for years. I pressed my face into the pillow and told myself to get it together. But I couldn't. I didn't hear him come in. The door opened gently. And there he was. Luke. He stood there for a moment, not saying anything. Just watching me in the dark, his silhouette lit by the soft hallway light. I didn't tell him to leave. I didn't have the strength. He walked in slowly, sat beside me on the bed. Not too close. Just enough to make his presence known. And then, without a word, he reached for me. I didn't resist. I leaned into him like I was collapsing into a memory that had never been mine to begin with. His arms came around me, strong and trembling. He didn't try to fix it. Didn't ask what was wrong. He just held me. And I held on longer than I should have. My face pressed into his shoulder. My hands gripping the fabric of his shirt. The beat of his heart loud in my ear. It should have felt wrong. But in that moment, it felt like the safest place in the world. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Minutes. Hours. Time blurred. Eventually, I pulled back. Just enough to look at him. Our faces were close. Too close. Breath mingling. Eyes locked. His hand still resting gently on my arm. There was a pause, that thin, breathless moment right before a decision is made. A heartbeat's length away from something irreversible. He looked at me like he was searching for permission. Like he was trying to hold back everything he wasn't supposed to feel. And then his fingers reached up, hesitant, and brushed a tear from my cheek. His hand lingered. Trembling. Warm. And that was the moment. Not a kiss. Not a confession. Just a single touch that said everything we couldn't. I pulled away. Barely. Just enough to reclaim the distance we'd crossed without realizing it. He didn't chase. He didn't speak. Neither did I. But we both knew, whatever we had been pretending Whatever lines we thought were still in place, they weren't. We hadn't crossed the line. But the line no longer existed. After that night, we avoided each other. Not out of anger, not out of shame, but because neither of us knew how to exist in the same space anymore without feeling the weight of what almost happened. Of what already had, in a way. The house felt colder. Not because the temperature changed, but because something had shifted between the walls. A silence had settled, not empty, but thick with things unsaid. I started walking softer, closing doors quieter, as if even sound might betray what had bloomed in the dark. Luke kept his distance. Didn't sit in the kitchen anymore while I made dinner. Didn't hover in the hallway. Didn't ask how I was. And I missed it. And hated myself for missing it. Then Mark came home. Suitcase in one hand, phone in the other. Dropped his bags by the door, kissed the top of my head without really looking at me, and asked what was for dinner. Just like that. Like everything was normal. Like time had stood still while he was gone. Like I hadn't been unraveling in his absence. He didn't notice the stiffness in my smile. Didn't catch the way my eyes flickered toward the hallway every time I heard footsteps. Didn't sense that something had shifted in the air around us. He was as oblivious as ever. Wrapped in spreadsheets, deadlines, hotel breakfasts. And Luke? He became a shadow. Quick hellos. Quieter goodbyes. Avoiding eye contact. Making himself smaller. I saw it in the way he barely entered a room anymore. How he no longer laughed at my dumb jokes. How he left the dishes in the sink instead of waiting for me to do them like he used to, like it had once been our unspoken ritual. I tried to convince myself it was better this way. That distance was what we needed. But it felt like living beside an open wound. One morning, I came down early, still in my robe, hair a mess, just hoping for 5 quiet minutes with a cup of coffee before the day began. And that's when I saw it. A small, folded note on the kitchen counter. My name wasn't on it, but I knew it was meant for me. The handwriting was his. Just 5 words, I'm moving in with Mom. My hand started shaking. I stood there staring at it for a long time. As if maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something else. Something that didn't feel like loss. I reached for my coffee mug, but my fingers missed the handle. It slipped. Fell, shattered across the tile floor. The sound echoed through the kitchen, sharp, sudden, final. And in that moment, it wasn't just glass that broke. It was the last thread of something I didn't even know I'd been clinging to. A connection. A presence. A warmth I hadn't dared to name. Gone. Just like that. No goodbye. No confrontation. Just silence, and the sound of my heart cracking quietly in my chest. After Luke left, the house returned to its old rhythm, quiet, structured, routine. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like an abandoned stage, like something important had ended, but the curtains hadn't been drawn. Mark moved through the days as if nothing had changed. He'd sip his coffee, read his emails at the kitchen table, kiss my cheek before walking out the door. Never once noticing the silence in me that grew heavier with each passing hour. But I noticed, and I couldn't stop noticing. The spaces where Luke used to be felt louder than anything else. The chair he always sat in. The smell of his shampoo still lingering in the upstairs bathroom. The closed door to his bedroom, like a sealed confession I wasn't allowed to open. I started staying up late, long after Mark had gone to bed. The house would grow still, and I'd sit at the dining room table with a blank notebook in front of me. Just writing. At first, it was scattered thoughts. Fragments of emotions I didn't know how to say out loud. But slowly, it became something more. A journal. A confession. A quiet place to retrace how it all unfolded, how something that began with kindness grew into something I still didn't have the words for. I wrote about the moment in the garage. The tea. The toast. The silence after he painted my toenails. The sound of his breath in my ear that night he held me. I wrote because I needed to understand. Because I didn't know who I was anymore. I started questioning everything. my marriage, my purpose, my worth. Had I failed as a wife? Had I waited too long for Mark to see me again? Had I let myself become invisible? Or had I crossed some quiet boundary inside myself, long before Luke ever knocked on that door? I thought about telling Mark. More than once. I'd lie beside him at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe, wondering if he'd even care. If I told him everything, would he be angry? Hurt? Or worse, would he shrug and say he understood? That maybe he saw it coming. That maybe he knew he lost me long ago and didn't have the strength to go looking. But I never told him. Not because I was afraid of the fallout, but because I didn't even know what I'd be confessing to. What had I done, really? Nothing physical. No kiss. No betrayal in the technical sense. And yet, I had given something of myself to Luke. Something fragile. Something real. And now it was gone. I wondered if he hated me. If I had ruined something in him. Poisoned his ability to trust. To feel safe. I wondered if he looked back on it all with shame, the way I sometimes did when I couldn't sleep. But then I'd remember that night. The way he touched my face. Not with desire. Not with hesitation. But with care. With reverence. Like he was trying to protect something in me that no one else had bothered to see. I replayed it over and over in my mind. Not because I missed the moment, but because it was the first time in so long that I had felt held. Not just physically. Emotionally.